Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this special edition of the JADS Expert Talks, again in this great chapel of JADS. So we are very happy to host our guests here. As I already said, it's a special edition. It's one of the 4 editions that are dedicated to the JADS Lustrum. So you, I think, by now know that we are here for 5 years and many years to come. And we had some 3 editions on the past activities of JADS. So the first one was more on the general strategy. Then we had 2 editions on the units. And today there is the 3rd edition on the 3rd unit. And that is the unit that has to do with data analytics and is headed by Erik Posma, who's sitting next to me and who will also act as a host. Ladies and gentlemen, as we always record these sessions, and there are some small house rules, maybe we could show them again. This is already the program. The house rules, well, you know them by now. We are living with those already for 2 years and try to escape from them, but they are still the same. So your cameras should be switched off. The mics muted. The session is being recorded with your consent, and there is ample opportunity for you to interact with us either through the chat. And is there a burning question, you can raise your virtual or possibly even after you have switched on the camera, your real hand. So try to interact with us. We like that. We sometimes forget about you, but we will do our best not to do that in this last and special edition. So the program is quite heavy as in terms of activities and switches. So we will start with Erik to look at his unit. So what he is doing with the unit, what are the research questions, what are the results that's being obtained, and then we have some deep dives where we also have guests. We will introduce them to you one by one when we start the deep dive that we are going to discuss. And finally, we will close by having a conversation with all the 4 persons that are involved in the strategy, and that is Renato Calzone, who have some new ideas, and of course the 3 unit leaders. And then it's time to close up, and we are close by 9 o'clock then. So that is what we are going to do, ladies and gentlemen. So please stay with us. I know a little bit about the details of the program. It's quite challenging. There are a lot of interesting guests, but let's start with Erik. Erik, you are a professor of artificial intelligence already for quite some time. Your home base is the university in Tilburg, but you are also with JADS as of the beginning. Could you share with us some let's say, thoughts about your past in the sense of, there are not so many professors who have a chair in artificial intelligence in the Netherlands for a very long time. So you are one of the early adopters in that field.
Maybe, or they can get rid of me. I don't know. But,
well, that's not the intention, Erik.
But there are more like me that have a long time chair.
Yes, I know. But let's say some 30 years ago, it was not the most popular chair that we had in computing science, I presume. Maybe Max Lauwers would oppose, but I know he's watching us at home, so we will get some apps in the meantime. But what made you decide to let's say, become a professor in artificial intelligence?
I never made that decision. I was just interested in artificial intelligence. Actually, I started from physics because I was interested in human perception and models of human perception. But when I studied cognitive science and AI, I became interested in machines, how you could model or understand human perception with machines. So that's how I started my academic career. And when I moved to Maastricht University for doing my PhD, I more and more became into AI. And the prevailing formalism in AI was logic.
Yes.
Logic. So most people who work in AI had a training in formal logic. I always was interested in neural networks or probabilistic methods. And that's how I pursued my goals and finally became a professor. Is that an answer to your question?
Well, of course, it's an answer to the question. But it appears like you have been, let's say, following your let's say, devotion to the subject of artificial intelligence. And in the meantime, you became a professor.
Yeah.
Just like that.
Yeah, actually.
That's an interesting career path.
Yeah.
Would you say that that still holds true also for young people trying to pursue a career path in this very same domain?
I was lucky. I had a mentor who also pushed me in that position or supported me in that position. And I think that still might happen. But nowadays, there's much more emphasis on whether you have NWO grants, etc. And sometimes I have the feeling that people don't look at the real performance, the intelligence that people have or the creativity. So it's more formalized now than it was.
Yeah.
And I think I regret that because I think that's not good for science and not good for the diversity of science.
Yeah. There is this special program within the 14 University of the Netherlands that focus on these new, let's say, rewarding issues.
Yeah.
And for instance, team science is one, but also developing academic skills is another domain. Even becoming, let's say, active in the field of generating impact that some, let's say, professors also think we shouldn't be doing. What's your position in this aspect?
Big mixed, because I think fundamental research or basic research is very important, and you should. It's very difficult to predict the social impact of your research. At the same time, I think many of these applied projects are very helpful to shape your basic research and to get new insights or new inspiration. This whole program at the universities, I have the feeling it's more talk than action.
What would it take to turn it into action?
Just by really showing that you do not punish people for doing things that are not in line with the standard way of doing things. And it's difficult because that's an international playing field. So if you want to have an international career and you follow this new Dutch way of having a career, it will be hard to get a job in international because that's not yet recognized. So it's hard to do these kind of things. You have to keep in mind that you need to be competitive also for the foreign market.
Yep. You mentioned your let's say supervisor or promoter that he stimulated you. What actually was he doing to achieve this objective?
He was so I was never so I know many colleague professors that were very keen on this professor chair. I was never keen on that. I was interested in research. And he created the opportunities to be promoted to professor, and before that, associate professor, etc. But the farther you come in the academic world, the more competitive it becomes. And I'm not a very competitive person, at least not in that respect. And so he helped me there a lot and stimulated me to get that position.
As in making you aware that these necessary steps should be taken?
Yeah.
Okay. And you did agree to follow those?
Not all of them.
Well, that brings us to the point that we would like to know which one you discarded, but let's skip that point. Erik, for quite some time already within JADS, you are the leader of the research unit, as we call it, data analytics. What makes you a leader?
Yeah, I call myself a coordinator because I want to coordinate and stimulate people in the unit. So we have defined a number of so-called labs. These are small groups of people, or mostly surrounded around one person. For instance, we will soon speak to Professor Maurits Kaptein. He leads one of these units about computational personalization based on causal inference and Bayesian approaches. And I see that as growth cones. So you should try to create circumstances that all these topics surrounded by one person or sometimes multiple persons, to feed them with the possibilities to grow and to join projects.
Yep. Why don't you call that leadership?
Because the old-fashioned model is that you have one leader and everybody is working for that leader. And sometimes it would be nice, but I cannot do that. So. And I think it's a bit old-fashioned.
Yeah,
and
also
for expanding JADS and to increasing the reach of JADS, I think the diversity is important. I can only cover the more technical aspects of AI, but we have a lot of disciplines in the unit. And I think I would like to see that these all blossom. And I think the current time also demands that.
I agree. So the flight of the buffalo, that's well known.
I don't know what is that?
The flight of the buffalo is the title of a book that describes this old-fashioned way of leadership by, let's say, a herd of buffaloes that follow one buffalo. And we know even of videos where the head buffalo jumps into a canyon and all the others follow the example. And that's the type of leadership we really would not like to have. But I think that there are also examples of leadership that we call leadership and that comply very much with the way you, let's say, stimulate and promote your people in your unit, I would say. So it's a humble way of positioning yourselves as a leader, but
yeah, but it's not the only way, because also in these growth goals, you have leaders, local leaders that should take a leader role in a scientific sense, that they give the example of how to do research and how you publish and these kind of things. So I think it is not one thing that should always be organized in this way. But in the current context, and given my personality, I think this is the best way.
Well, that's a good way to follow your actual, let's say, skills and preferences also in this respect. Erik, another point also in terms of setting directions for the future. So one of the things that you do is also being a scientific director of the KPN JADS Responsible AI Lab, which is part of the network of ICAI, which stands for Innovation Center for Artificial Intelligence. So it's a novel development in the Netherlands. What is the Responsible AI Lab doing?
Well, maybe it's good to understand the history. When JADS started, there were also already good relations with KPN. And then we started the initial projects. And after a few years, also with the help of the impact team, we managed to connect to the ICAI initiative, which entails that you have a collaboration with a company, and then there's a mutual funding and you get PhDs. And it's a national network where you also exchange ideas and expertise. But the idea of the Responsible AI Lab is to focus on development of technologies that promote a responsible use of AI. For instance, the transparency of AI algorithms, or developing algorithms that have built-in privacy preserving characteristics. That's typical for a responsible AI.
Yeah. So we have been discussing also within the context of the expert talks this relation with KPN.
Yeah,
I think we did as last time as part of Xenia Podornicina's unit. What is your main takeaway from this collaboration?
My main takeaway is that this is a pressing problem for companies. That's on the company side. And on the other hand, that the fact that COVID interfered was really a challenge. And because, of course, I could tell here it's a great project, very successful, but we really suffered from the COVID situation, because one of the most important challenges of a PhD is to finish the PhD in time and do that and come up with ways to deal with all the blowbacks that you have, rejected papers, etc. And COVID made that very hard. So we're now actually actively correcting that by having meetings with the students and frequent meetings. But that is the main takeaway, which has nothing to do with this lab, but just with the circumstance.
Yes.
But other than that, I think I already learned a lot from this collaboration, because many problems, as I said before, these kind of practical projects raise all kinds of problems that you never realized that these were problems. And that gives inspiration for new research.
I know you as a true scientist that values the academic virtues very much. On the other hand, we also know a discussion going on in the Netherlands that let's say institutions, academic institutions, shouldn't involve too much in, let's say, working together with companies, the private sector, as it is often called, for two reasons: that it jeopardizes the neutrality, but also, let's say, defocuses us from the true scientific way of working, because other skills are involved in the way we engage with colleagues within industry. So how do you deal with this apparent two ways of looking at science.
By putting it on the table also for PhDs to start it, because this is a typical question of PhDs in the beginning, and also discussing that in this case with KPN. It should be clear that the funder of the project deserves to get something back. So the expertise and the insights and sometimes algorithmic blueprints or something like that. At the same time, there should be a decent scientific work. So the company should also respect the fact that these PhD researchers have to deliver a PhD and publish in academic journals. So sometimes this gives some tension, but the best way to deal with that is to discuss it and to get it out.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
But there are also some people who claim that the funders shouldn't even be involved in setting direction for the research programs as such.
Yeah, that refers to what I said before. I think we should preserve a portion of any funding for basic research that is just sometimes called blue sky research or anything you want to do. A lot of interesting research topics are unfundable. And that's because they're not in vogue or not considered to be socially relevant. And I think that's a mistake. You should also fund stupid or strange ideas sometimes.
Yeah. Curiosity-driven research. It is sometimes called. Very good. Maybe to complete the story on the unit, what are the main topics that the unit is studying currently, and where would you like to go from here, Erik?
Now so apart from this causal inference team, we also have social network analysis. We will also hear more about this today, biodiversity research, computational intelligence. And there are many application domains, but I don't emphasize them because many of these techniques can be applied to many different application domains. And fortunately, we are involved in an upcoming project in the Caribbean, where we have many of our members participating in all kinds of ways to study how you can make more efficient use of sustainable energy and how to provide clean water on the island. And this is a kind of test case for broadening the scope in other bigger countries. And that fits nicely with the idea that we also would like to move, that is my ambition, to move a bit more towards things that really contribute to a better society.
Excellent. And are you satisfied with the results?
I'm never satisfied. I'm always ambitious. I want to push further. And I think all members of my unit have the same thing.
And let's say that is a common type of culture in the unit, that you're all dissatisfied on a daily basis.
Well, no, not dissatisfied, ambitious. Not dissatisfied sounds too negative. No, ambitious. You want to improve things or get further, get new projects, these kind of things.
Excellent. All right. Then, ladies and gentlemen, let's turn into some of the deep dives. And it gives me great pleasure, for personal reasons, which I will disclose in a few seconds from now, to welcome Maurits Kaptein to the table. Please, Maurits, join us. And Maurits, ladies and gentlemen, and we have a long, let's say, standing positive history in collaboration. Maybe to say a few words on that, when Maurits was doing his master's, I think it was at that point in time, you approached Philips Research, where I was working. And well, we have been collaborating ever since. And what is really nice, I think there are two elements that I find personally very characteristic for you as a researcher. That is that you always have a plan. You know what you want and you go for it. Like in our case, you came to us and we were very proud as Philips Research to host you. But one of the conditions that you said you would need to work with us is that we would give you the freedom to go to Stanford and work with Clifford Nash. And well, that was one of the first students with a condition like that. So we collected some money and made it work. So that is great. But there is also the second point, and that is that you have been working all the time that I have been following you, which is something like 15 years now, to combine scientific interest and curiosity on the one hand side, starting with statistics. That was, I think, one of the first subjects that you studied on the one hand side, with generating impact with the type of work that you do, even to the extent that you want to be involved in entrepreneurship, startup type of activities, so pushing the boundaries where it comes to impact. Is that the correct characterization of you as a person?
Yes, I think so. Or it's at least correct that I like to do both. So I like to work on scientific work. And here I would say I would prefer even fairly theoretical work. But I also like to work on applications. And the moment we do applications, I like to actually take them out to the real world. And I think then fairly quickly you end up being an entrepreneur in many ways.
You have been with JADS already, let's say, a long time, maybe even as of the beginning, I tend to recall. And but what is the because you are a demanding person from, let's say, how I know you.
Thank you.
And you choose only the best to work with. Is JADS providing you with that space you need to perform?
Yes, I would say yes. One of the core things that was obviously happening at JADS when it started, it was an amazing collaboration between Tilburg and Eindhoven, and between kind of some of the, in some ways, social sciences and the, you know, more beta or technical sciences, which I've always thought to be very much connected. I mean, Clifford Ness's work, for example, clearly opened in some ways, you know, this whole research line of researching how people interact with computers, and I think he was deeply ingrained in both of these fields. And obviously, JADS, especially when it started, which is, you know, when I decided to join, was this, you know, vibrant place where a lot of new things could happen. And in some ways, even what Erik was saying, where's the space to do things that are, you know, somewhat outside of the beaten track, and that's in new places, basically. And I think for a large part, JADS, I always mix between the two, is actually kind of delivering on that promise, and is still tracking in ways in which the two mother universities aren't, basically. So I think it's an extremely interesting place to be, especially for this kind of crossover between science and entrepreneurship. So yeah, what I hope to find, I think, is happening.
And it still is after 5 years?
Yeah, I mean, with ups and downs of how things go in 5 years. Obviously, I think it was set up extremely ambitious. We had talks about, you know, making this Nobel laureate kind of level scientific institute here. We're not there yet, I would say. But still, you know, be ambitious, maybe be a bit dissatisfied every now and then. But I think we're trying.
What would be your, let's say, main suggestion for direction change, or what is it that you really think is missing and is achievable on the other hand?
Within JADS?
Yes.
Ooh. I would appreciate some more, but I don't know if that's necessarily time or focus on kind of, I would call it theoretical work. I don't know if that's the best name, but kind of researching, for example, causality is one of the topics that I'm myself deeply interested in, or things like reinforcement learning, active learning. There's a lot of topics in data science that have very obvious applications, but I think are worth studying outside of their applications, just purely for their theoretical interests. And
would you agree, Erik? Because you are the person to speak to from the perspective of the unit and the leadership. What is holding you back?
I think this has to do with connecting the people in JADS. And actually, we have some of these discussions, but that's also with Tilburg, where we have a group doing some of these things, like deep reinforcement learning. But I fully agree that we should emphasize this more. That's what I just said about this KPN lab, that we try to intensify these kind of meetings and to discuss these things.
So the KPN project, so I'm lucky enough to supervise one of the talented PhD students in that project. I would say that they are in many ways, this is paying off. So I think they're on the KPN side, there's a very talented group of people as well who are deeply interested in some of these fairly fundamental problems and see the value of studying them as a fundamental problem. So at least kind of in the sub project that I'm involved in some ways it's working very, very well, I would say. So it's also not about necessarily interacting with industry. It is much more about setting the expectations of a project and mutually kind of understanding what it means to do science. So that's kind of the way I would think about it.
And if we bring in the concept of time scale, often let's say industry or let's say, or an organization, to put it neutrally, that is going to work with us. They don't have an horizon to do this type of, let's say, value-free research that is needed in terms of the time span that has to be taken into account.
Yeah, I think that definitely plays a role, but I think that makes that many of these, I mean, also when we met at Philips, I think at some point in time, actually at multiple points in time at Philips, there was a lot of space to do very fundamental research. And in some ways, when companies are sizable enough and the people that are there appreciate the long term and kind of appreciate the value of science, this can happen. With smaller companies, it's hard. And I do think in some ways it changes somewhat irregularly over time, even within companies. So I would say that even within a company like Philips, over the last 2 decades, there's been years in which there was a lot of room for fundamental work, and then there's been years in which a lot of that room was squeezed out.
Basically. Yes, that's actually true. When I myself joined Philips Research, that was in 1982. I'm very hesitant to disclose that. It's a very long time ago. But we live by this simple notion of hiring the right people, making them happy, and turn them loose, under the assumption that all these people always would be influenced by the culture and the environment that they would be working in to do the right things, because there was so much interaction. And I think that really was a great, let's say, achievement from this institution. But very many of us, and well, there is some group of persons who every now and then meet each other, who are working already then within the NOT lab, as it was called, we agree. But why did we fail to continue that? And because it was copied from the university, from the academia.
Just economics? That was too expensive?
Well, you are the expert.
No, I'm not an expert on Philips, although I had some funding from Philips.
But also within universities. I just happened to get involved today in a discussion on a very, very nice collaboration. We call it a network project with NWO on 5 newly subsidized ELSA labs. And we had 90 minutes to discuss our future content-wise, and we spent half an hour, 30 minutes on how we would fund it. And the money was already on the table. So what is happening?
Well, so I do think actually that NWO, definitely in the Netherlands, maybe broader funding agencies, played somewhat of a weird role in very much stimulating working with companies, basically, which by now, I think for a large proportion of the grants is kind of obligatory to make these kind of consortia, which I'm not necessarily sure are actually pushing the best of both worlds. And sometimes
this
maybe,
matching element,
which is very, very common now. So you know, in some ways, funding agencies play a role. I'm not totally sure whether it's always the economics involved. I mean, I've seen even in more recent years, I think in Microsoft, at some point, at Microsoft Research, had a lot of amazingly good academics going there. A lot of them have left again, I guess, because you know the environment changed. Same was true at some point even for Facebook. I think amazing work was being done there. A lot of people left again.
But to clarify, I was referring to Philips because I know what happened at Philips with the NOT lab. But in the general situation, that does not apply.
But it's I still think it's kind of interesting to understand why that goes back and forth, and this might also be happening indeed in universities.
Maurits, your current research work focuses on a number of topics like sequential learning, causal inference, computational models, and they also focus a little bit on the healthcare domain. Could you share with the audience a little bit of the, let's say, of the details of this type of work? So what is the Holy Grail, for instance, or what are you really after?
Well, some fairly basic understanding of what you can actually generalize based on some. I mean, it's all in some ways very much driven by my first love, statistics. I don't know if that was necessarily my first love, but this basic idea of, you know, if I have some data of how people respond to specific treatments, which is obviously something that's happening in healthcare in all kinds of ways, and nowadays we have more and more of this data because we're actually measuring this in hospitals, for example. what does that actually allow me to say about what's going to happen if I administer the same treatment to you specifically? Like how much can I say? Is there like, what do I need to assume to make these decisions? What new data should I actually get to make that decision as quickly as possible better, basically? And this is really driving, I think, a lot of my interest there. It's just really understanding what can we learn from data, and also what are people claiming that they've learned from data, which I would say is, you know, at least not necessarily true. Let's put it that way. Yeah? So what are they implicitly assuming in some of the conclusions that are drawn? And I think that's in some ways a very fundamental data science question, basically. But it has obvious applications in healthcare where it's, I would say, tremendously important, because it also boils down to issues like what type of data should we be collecting, or what should we know, like what should we store, basically. And just making minor changes there can sometimes like bring very big benefits for society, basically.
Yep. If we would briefly resort to this analytics continuum that we all know originally launched by Davenport, I think it was. Where would you position yourselves? Is it at the descriptive or the predictive, or even at this new fifth level where also the cognitive part comes in?
Ooh, I think there's space for all of those, depending on which problem
That's
you're
a nice
in.
answer,
Yeah.
But in terms of intricacy, complexity, the higher levels are often more appealing. But
yes. True, but I think people sometimes underestimate the complexity of some of the lower levels. Let's just put it that way.
Oh, that's interesting. So you can turn things into complex questions at any level.
I think so, and I think even descriptives doing those well. I mean, and then it's obviously like this additional connotation of how people perceive those descriptives and what kind of conclusions do they draw from them. But doing that well in such a way that those conclusions are actually relatively valid, I think is already a challenge on its own.
Yeah. I tend to recall that that you are also a member of this huge zwaartekracht project, gravitation.
Gravitation
I was looking for the English word. But it's a big NWO on explainable AI. I think it was.
Yes.
Well.
It's slightly broader. It's basically what the impacts are in society of the growing use of algorithms, often kind of AI models, which are obviously at some point when you're actually using them just algorithms, and kind of how we should deal with these algorithms to basically have some guardrails for its societal impact, where some of the questions are very closely related to explainable AI type questions. It's a slightly broader project because it's actually kind of in a consortium with people from humanities, from social sciences. It's also kind of looking just at the broader societal impact of some of these.
How is the connection to JADS?
Well,
is there a connection? Maybe you are the connection?
Well, I am definitely one of the reasons for that connection, but the way that was established was in part, the applicants are a group of people that I've been collaborating with in various forms over the last few years. But I think it's very well founded or grounded to have some of this work at JADS as well, because what we are focusing on specifically and kind of our sub projects basically is, in a sense, the effect of kind of machine learning or AI algorithms to draw inferences from data sets in a healthcare and using those for treatment plans, for example. And then what are the actual societal impacts of using kind of these large scale observational data sets to guide your decision making in healthcare. So comes very close to the things that I've been studying, the things that a lot of my PhDs in the lab have been studying, the collaborations that we have with, for example, IKNL and with CZ. So in some ways there is a very obvious kind of link between.
And if we would stretch it into the second love of yours being the entrepreneurship,
What is there anything? Is there
any
anything
entrepreneurship in gravity?
Well, I would say not necessarily kind of immediately closely connected to this specific proposal.
Yes.
Because in some ways, one of the nice things about this proposal is that it's maybe a bit less kind of driven by.
Sure.
It does permit some freedom for research. But there's very close links. Even the company that I'm now involved in and trying to grow basically originated from this very simple idea that we're training all kinds of models based on data in healthcare that are, for example, driving treatment decisions for specific individuals. Now, how would we actually use these things? Are we going to basically send all the data from all the hospitals to some central place where we're doing these computations and then, having in some ways a lot of risk for breaches of privacy and kind of inefficiencies in all this network traffic? Or are we just going to take the model once we have it and send it to the hospital for kind of execution over there? And what do we do if we have a new version of that model? And in the end, we started building technologies to basically a platform that moves models around, that manages which models are running where. It was very much driven, actually, the initial thinking was very much driven from this healthcare context. I would by now, 2 years in, say that in healthcare, there's other problems that are not technical in nature, that are actually driving the adoption of some of these models. So we found different places to apply this technology in a sense, but the main backdrop is still the same. It's this idea that if we want to use AI or machine learning at scale, we probably, or at least there will be cases where we want to do this on location, on the edge, as one would say. So there is
computing at the terminal.
So there's a need for an infrastructure to actually manage that. Like there was, some talk about the ML ops, or at least one of the next speakers, I think, will be referring to that at some point, which is kind of this practice of managing how you deploy your machine learning algorithms. Often that's focused on kind of cloud deployments, but moving that to the edge, I think, is a relevant question, but very much an applied question.
Sure. Thank you very much for being with us and disclosing so many of your thoughts and enthusiasm about working with JADS. And the best of luck with the good work to come, Maurits.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks.
So then we move, ladies and gentlemen, to our next guest, and we would like to invite Claudia Zucker to the table. Please, Claudia. Ladies and gentlemen, Claudia is an assistant professor at JADS, but she was educated in the UK. And maybe we would like to hear some of your experience from, let's say, the two universities that you have been studying at, so Exeter and Glasgow. You told us that you had been working at the interface of the medical and the AI type of activities. So one of the burning questions for us then is, why did you decide to come to the Netherlands and join JADS?
Okay, let's take it from the beginning. Good evening, everyone. So I did my PhD at the University of Exeter, and I was working in a center that is called QSTEP Center, which is a national project in the UK that is aimed at increasing the level of mathematics in social sciences, literally, that's in the most simple way. So basically it was a living lab of computational social science, and I've been trained there in an interdisciplinary way. So during that time, I was working in a European project, Marie Curie project, doing an industrial PhD in this project called Vote Advice, because basically we were collaborating with the Netherlands, with a company based in Amsterdam, building apps called voting advice applications for helping people to decide who to vote for during the election. So this was the broad topic where my PhD was developed. And after that, yes, I moved to the University of Glasgow, and I was working in a center called Social SPA, Social and Public Health Center. And basically there I was part of a group called Complexity Group, that that had the aim of studying health-related problem and population health problems using complexity science. Complexity science is a large label that also includes AI.
Yes.
And basically the idea is to look at problems not as not in a reductionist way, but as part of a larger system. So in a very specific way, talking about diseases, medical diseases, we can talk about comorbidity. If you have one disease, it's more likely that you get another one. But this concept can be applied to many other things. So basically you are embedded in a system of things, of people, of relationships, of things that you do, and this affects your health condition. And if you look at that in a complex way, it's much more likely that you will find the actual causes of a problem and be able to address it to a larger extent. Yeah, that was my UK experience.
Yes. And well, but that leaves open this last part of the question.
Yeah.
If you allow me. So how did you learn about the existence of JADS?
Very simply through people that I knew. So basically, my main area of expertise is social network analysis, and I knew that Roger Landers was working here.
Yes.
And then I knew that they were looking for a new assistant professor, and 2 + 2 is still 4. So here I am.
Yeah, and you are with us now for, I think it 1 or 2 years.
2 years.
Yeah,
almost.
2 years.
In
Yeah.
August, it will be
And
2 years.
well, which amounts up to 40% of the lifetime of JADS already. So that makes you, or that puts you in a position to speak up. How is JADS doing, according your opinion?
JADS is doing well. And that doesn't mean that it cannot do even better. So there is always room for improving, but JADS is doing well. It's young and dynamic. There is a lot of room for new ideas, for dialogue, for interdisciplinarity that I really like, honestly. So JADS is doing quite well.
Yes, great. I know that you prepared a few slides for us.
Yeah, I like to talk with pictures.
Yes, but we like to look at pictures. So that is
Thank you.
a nice coincidence. Could you explain on the basis of your pictures what the subject of your study is in the domain of social network analysis?
Yes. So this sentence I'm starting with, this title is the summary, like something that summarizes a little bit what I believe I do. So from understanding to intervening in complex social system for social change. Let me take it from the very beginning. So there is science and there is the humanities. That's what mostly people see when they look at universities and science in general. Social sciences and humanities are the binomial, but this binomial is not really there. It's maybe used to be there, but now is really not there anymore. Just think about historical data that is being processed with machine learning. Just a stupid example to say that is not there at all. Or Shakespeare that is being analyzed with topic models or things like that. And anyway, social science, that is what I believe I do, is neither, is not humanities, and is not science according to many people. It's still something alternative to both, this gray area that nobody really understands what it is. In reality, social science is science. Just if you want to take it in a very biological way, just think about the fact that you're analyzing people, and people have brains, and in order to understand what they think, you need to understand their brains. So this is science, sorry, but that's just science. And the discussion can get really methodological, and we can talk about humanities in a discursive way and science in an analytical way, but the very short point is that social science is science. And I'm not the only one saying that, because Auguste Comte, over 100 years ago, used to call it social physics. The problem of Comte was that he didn't have a computer. And without a computer, it was really hard to take social science into a new dimension of testing hypotheses and doing something interesting, because for as much as you need a lot of data when you analyze planets and other physical interesting things, the data that you need to analyze people, it's much more. So there was no way that Compt could have made it back then. But fortunately now we can, because we had the data science revolution, the data revolution, mostly the computer revolution. And after that, we have large data sets, we have heterogeneous information, we can like use data of different kinds, triangulate. So we basically analyze complex systems. So that's what we do at JADS, basically. We like to work, we do cool stuff with data, right? We do that. So
yep,
that's the point. And when you have complex data, you mostly have complex systems. That relates to what I was telling before about the place where I was working at the University of Glasgow. So this is just an example. Look at this picture. These are wallets on the blockchain. This is regular. There is definitely a pattern there. Which pattern I will let you know in a while, but there is a pattern there. So this is a system. It's organized. It works according to principles that you can get back to a physical principle to a certain extent. And there are plenty of these regularities in the social world out there. You can study people or animals even. It could be still considered social science, or behaviors are hardcore social science, or mental maps, for instance. And so, for instance, this is actually a mental map. This is some work that I'm doing right now. It's a collective mental map of stakeholders involved in implementing a new type of education. And this is a system. So when you plot a system, this is a causal loop diagram. When you want to understand the system, you need to have tools to do that. And you need to collect data and to describe it, having the right instruments to do that. And then you can do many things with this. So this is a causal loop diagram, but this is also a network. As a matter of fact, it's a network, even if technically speaking is a causal loop diagram. So for as much as you can develop a system dynamic model, which is usually what you do with a causal loop diagrams, you can also analyze it as a network to understand to a larger extent in a descriptive way or in a causal inference way what is happening there. And so after you understand the system, only after you understand the system, you can intervene into a system. And that's also what we do at JADS very often when we promote like startups and we do entrepreneurship, because that's intervening. So you're intervening in a system that is already organized, it's already out there, and you are introducing something new, and you want to introduce something positive, and you want to improve what people already do with your innovation, right? And but you can do that only if you understand what the system is. Otherwise, this is not going to work out. That's pretty obvious, I will say. And so we are in the time where complexity and computational social sciences, which are two different families, I would say, but that they overlap a lot, are the tools that we have to use right now. This is a bag of tools, as we already said, that involves many things like social network analysis or network analysis, which is well, they are related. They are slightly different angles, but they are very much related. And then there is AI, and then there is system dynamics with group model building and things like that, agent-based model, and many more. But these are the tools that we need now to understand reality, to understand society, and to make it better, to make this world a better place, or whatever better means, because I mean, Hitler thought it was definitely making a better world, but it wasn't definitely true. So as long as your goals are considered good by the people that are interested by the change that you're introducing, that's good. You need to make sure that people are actually with you when you introduce change. And yeah, I just want to also stress on the fact that we are developing some interesting some interesting projects where we want to introduce AI to a larger extent in a system, and the introduction of something innovative, technological as AI has changed. As a matter of fact, it does. It changes individuals, it changed behavior, it changed the system itself. And this is something that JADS can help with, and we can definitely understand this problem to a larger extent. And let's hope to do that in the future.
Yes, yes. Well, if I look at this list at the right-hand side, it reminds me of the most recent document or report that de wetenschappelijke raad van het regeringsbeleid, that is a Dutch notion for a think tank that we have, and they issued a new report, and I think the English title would be Mission AI, and their claim to fame is that they position AI as a systems technology, so a technology that has an effect on all kind of elements that affect society in the broadest sense. If I look at this list at the right-hand side of your slide, there are very many connections to those things. So this complexity, let's say theory or modeling type of approach that you take, do you and your colleagues also look upon AI as, let's say, a technology that's going to change the societal elements from a systems perspective?
That's one of the possible approaches that we can take. Yes, I will say yes to a certain extent, but we need to question this point rather than assuming this point. I will say that we need to verify that. The answer is most likely yes, but still it's something that we need to verify, because let's say that you introduce some AI that is not actually making a change, but is actually replacing something that is already happening. Then you might not actually see a systemic change. You might just see that the system works smoothly, but not really in a different way. So that's why it's more subtle than that. But most likely, most of the AI that you can introduce will produce actual change. There is something interesting that is happening now. I see that they are developing registers in the city of Amsterdam and in Helsinki, if I'm correct, to map down what are the algorithms in use inside the municipality. And this is something that I think we should definitely monitor, considering that this has effect on the citizen of the cities. And
is that related to what often is called the development of digital twins, where you, let's say, can have a copy of the city, but then in a digital fashion to look at all kind of elements from an analytics perspective? Or
I think that these are connected, but a little bit different, because that one is broadly defined. There are more things inside, but this is a very specific thing only about AI.
That's correct.
Don't you agree that they should also have done that for the whole world? Of course, it's very difficult, but all these machine learning algorithms that are now continuously tracking us, that's of course what we lose track of what's happening.
Is that AI and machine learning algorithms are everywhere, but most of the people don't even know what they are.
That's interesting. Claudia, our time is up already, unfortunately.
Thank you very much
for sharing your visions and ideas with us. And good luck with the good work, and hope to see you soon back and to learn from you what you have discovered on social networks. In the meantime,
thank you.
And stay with us, please. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we are ready for the third deep dive, and we will do that with two guests at the same time. So I would like to welcome, as the first of the two guests, Dan Stowell. Please, Dan, go ahead. And there is this second guest, we will invite them also to the table, Colin van Lieshout. And if you might ask yourselves the question, why are, what brings these persons together? We asked that question to both of them, and they agreed to put it into the social domain. Social data science. That was the notion that the two of you agreed upon. Is that still so?
Yeah, definitely.
All right. So there seems to be some sustainable elements to this. But let me start with you, Dan. You have basically two affiliations. So on the one hand side, you are working with Tilburg University, and on the other hand, you are also, as a scientist, connected to Naturalis, which is, most people in the Netherlands know Naturalis as this museum where you can see the animals from a long time ago, but it is also a research center in the Netherlands on biodiversity. So could you tell us a little bit more about Naturalis and connect it to your personal interests from a scientific perspective then?
That's right, yes. So since I've been here, I have met the T-Rex, absolutely. But what attracts me to Naturalis, and what attracts me to working jointly between JADS and Naturalis, is that Naturalis is the Naturalis Biodiversity Center. It is the center for let's say, intelligence about the biodiversity of the whole of the Netherlands and beyond.
Yes.
And so you know it as a collection, as a museum. It has collections of physical specimens of everything from the tiniest insects to the large dinosaurs. And these collection items are useful for some of this intelligence. So we can maybe dig into that a little bit later. But the physical specimens themselves are certainly relevant to data science. But what you might not know is that Naturalis is also involved in projects to ongoing projects right now to monitor, let's say, insects in the fields using image recognition and AI on behalf of the gemeente in the Netherlands.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of energy in Naturalis for using data science and AI to help monitor, understand, and preserve the biodiversity in the country.
Yeah, that's a great story. Colin, you are an alumnus of JADS, and well, JADS is only there for 5 years, so you are already one of the persons that we normally connected to the history. So at some point in time, Colin, you decided to study at JADS, and what was the reason to decide to make that step?
At the time when I first heard about JADS, I was doing a master in business information management. And then when I was sort of completing that, I was making the decision, okay, do I want to start working right away and become like an IT consultant and talk a lot about technology with people? Or do I actually also want to learn how to develop solutions myself? And the second was something that I found very interesting because I was already learning a little bit about it, but not as much. And JADS seemed like a really, new, interesting, live environment where you can do a lot of cool stuff, and also the relationship with entrepreneurship. It just seemed very interesting to me. So I thought, okay, let's give it a shot, and it's really delivered. So I had a good time here.
Yeah, but you are now working at Society.
Yeah.
Is that a natural continuation of the things that you were doing at JADS in terms of the spirit that you just alluded to?
So if we talk about the topic of this session,
yes,
data science for the social good. When I was at JADS, I wrote my thesis about quantifying river plastic using deep learning solutions, and I worked together with Erik on that. And I also had my own company for a while, with which we did a lot of social data science projects. Currently, indeed, I'm working at Society, which is a really large IT consulting firm, and we are working on developing IT solutions in the broadest sense. So we are working for all of the large organizations basically in the Netherlands, so a lot of public organizations, but also commercial organizations. And of course, there's a lot of opportunities for IT to contribute to a more improving society. So for example, now I'm working on fraud detection in the financial sector, which is very interesting because fraud, money laundering, such things are very have a huge impact on society, and it's costing society a lot of money. So that's definitely still I really enjoy having some social element in my projects. Eventually I also want to get back to more regarding sustainability and such things.
Yep. Well, which is good. So maybe to stay a little bit with your previous work, then the work that you did together with Erik in his unit on cleaning the ocean. Could you share with us briefly what you have been studying there and how successful you have been in cleaning the ocean?
Okay, maybe some of you have heard of the organization, the Ocean Cleanup. I think they started about 10 years ago with the big vision that all of the plastic that's in the ocean should be cleaned up, because it stays there and fish eat it, and a lot of fish, sea animals die from it, and it eventually gets into our food chain as well. So the organization is developing solutions to intercept plastic in rivers and oceans. What I was working on is actually collecting data to improve the understanding of this big problem, because it's quite a complex problem. I was focused on rivers, and yeah, the way plastic flows in rivers is dependent on a lot of different factors. So if you want to intercept plastic in a river, you really need to know how the plastic behaves. And we, for my thesis, we were developing a camera system that can be mounted on a bridge, which is looking down on the river. It sends images to the cloud, and we developed the object detection neural network that automatically detects all the plastics in the images. And then, yeah, you can create, for example, a dashboard that actually shows the output to, for example, the local government or to the organization itself where they want to deploy solutions. And that was my thesis, for which Erik was my supervisor. And yeah, it was such an interesting topic that we decided to attempt to write a paper about it and submit it for publication. And luckily, yeah, we were very happy. It took about a year, I think, before it was accepted, not because of feedback, but just because they waited a long time each time before they responded. But now we have actually published this as a research, and it's also being used and referenced to by other studies. So that's very interesting.
Very rewarding also. So that means that you have been dealing with the issue of living in the water, underwater, which is one of the SDGs, as we call them, so the Sustainable Development Goals. Then you are living on the land, to put it in SDG terminology. And also, of course, in real life. What is your opinion about these SDGs? Are they useful in the way they direct your work, or are capable of opening new issues, or are you hesitant about it?
Well, the UN Sustainable Development Goals, they're quite a big list of things that, to a first approximation, everyone on the planet wants to achieve. That's what the UN wanted to do with them. And so it's sustainability and it's development in terms of poverty and so on. So it's a very big list of things. And from my perspective, we have the life on land goal and the life underwater goal, and together they include a lot of interesting things with respect to biodiversity and related things. It's rather a large bag with a lot of different things in it. So I don't tend to frame my work in terms of these SDGs, but everyone knows, we all know here about the crisis, the many crises of our times. We have climate crisis, we have biodiversity crisis, we have various others. And one of the things that often troubles me when I'm trying to present my own work is that we're doing AI for these things. Actually, AI, data science, these are not the solution to any of these things, in fact. So it was alluded to there by Colin that, we're not using AI to get plastic out of the ocean. We're using AI to provide intelligence to the people who are actually doing the job, or the machines that are actually doing the job. The same is true for biodiversity, and the same is true for climate crisis as well. So we want to monitor these things and understand these things. We do it in various ways. So in my own work, we try to use sound recognition to understand which animals are where. We'd also like to know how they're interacting with each other. So there's as Claudia was describing, complexity and network interactions. So it's not just individual dots, but there are connections between the dots. These connections are very important in biodiversity, and the same is true of all the different interactions within climate as well. So that's how I prefer to frame these things. Many of us are motivated by some of the troubles of our times, and the UN Sustainable Development Goals, they do cover a lot of those things. And it covers a lot of other things besides. It's many of us can situate our work within one or more SDGs.
Yes. Yeah. But you, at least you give me the impression that you don't see or look at the SDGs as direction setting or task setting for artificial intelligence development
Right.
in the broad?
That's a really good question. So I guess my reaction is that I have been working on these topics for quite a long time before I came to the SDGs and to understanding what they were. So when I read the UN Sustainable Development Goals, I thought, well, how does this list change what I want to do?
Yes.
And frankly, it doesn't change it very much.
But that's interesting. Because you are already there, or
yes,
because there is a disconnect?
Because I have arrived by a different route to
Yes.
a position of knowing what we
Yes,
need
I
to
get
do.
your point.
Yeah, but the SDGs are a very good guide to people coming into these things to say, what do we need to do with data science, for example. I want to give a counter example, which is just a very good, essentially a textbook that was published on Archive, which is simply a big PDF called Tackling Climate Crisis with AI. And it's just a very good guide to all of that. And they provide a systematic analysis of all the hundreds of different ways we can address climate change with AI and related methods.
Yep.
And I recommend that to people who are asking me, what can we do about climate change?
Yes, that's interesting. That's a good point. Does that ring a bell to you, Eric?
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, for what reason?
Because I know this book.
But that is a good starting point. But having said that, what is of particular interest in the book to connect artificial intelligence with, well, sustainability in the broader sense then, or climate change?
Well, it may be useful that it was written by machine learning researchers rather than people who don't really understand machine learning but want some solutions.
Yeah.
But the really useful thing about it is that it is a very pragmatic book. It is not a theoretically oriented book. It's a pragmatic book which says, if for each section, what is the essentially what's the magnitude of contribution we can expect to make from each of these things. So if you're a student starting on a undergraduate or master's, you can go through that and go, I'm interested in this, but it doesn't seem to have a very high impact. I'm not interested in that, but it does seem to have an impact. What am I going to do?
Yes, that's interesting. Well, if we can continue the discussion along those lines a little. So what brings the two of you together, apart from JADS, as in the interest in the social data science, looking at JADS, what would you recommend to us as one of the next steps that we should, let's say, advocate or develop? Because it has a content part and it also has let's say, a communications part, as we always call it. So what would you recommend to us as JADS, as a community, to make this domain of social data science more publicly known, for instance, to young, talented people like yourselves?
I think a lot that you do during your studies inspires you, basically on what you're going to do after that. So if during the projects which you do during your studies, there's already a strong direction, there's a strong share of projects that are related to the social domain that actually have social impact instead, rather than only the really commercially oriented churn prediction models, for example, that you're working on in the classroom. I think that already helps really to steer students maybe into that direction, to make them interested about these opportunities, and also make them aware of them. And also, I think working together with organizations that, for example, such as Naturalis, but also organizations that have a lot of domain experts that are working in the field, actually trying to solve, trying to work together with people in the nature, and to have to make the step also from having innovative projects that are only research to actually having projects that are implemented, that are creating insights on a daily basis to basically the next step from only have a proof of concept to using, for example, MLOps practices to have bring the models that you are using into production, such that you are creating daily insights that can be used by these organizations.
Yep.
Such things can really help students, I think, to get a better sense of what is all possible.
Yep. So preparing a little bit for landing in the social domain. That's what I hear you say. Yep. What would be your take?
Yeah, well, largely I simply concur with all of that. I think JADS has a good position in terms of its youth and its entrepreneurial sort of nature to sort of move into these kind of areas and do really good things. And if I had one piece of advice, it's simply that now that we're coming out of the era of lockdowns, we can take more advantage of collaborations in terms of people spending time in different groups. So, for example, students could come to or from JADS to work not only with Naturalis and other businesses and other organizations, but also with the associated universities. I think as we get more into physically collaborating, that will be a good benefit. We can just make sure we don't forget about.
What's your position in this, Erik? Is that something that appeals to you? And if so, well, I was hoping so. Would you be willing to redirect the program of your unit a little bit to accommodate these suggestions?
Yes, and in fact, we're doing it already.
That's great.
So because I have since a few years, I think it's useful to direct these applied projects more to the social good, whatever that is. But we understand what we mean.
Yes.
And to focus not on the churning projects, but on projects that somehow benefit a better world. And we're doing that already with this project in the Caribbean that I said, that's an upcoming project. And I would like to stimulate people also in education, and also in research to focus on these kind of projects. I used to teach a deep learning course in JADS, now but somebody else is doing it. And there you have all kinds of assignments. And I think all these topics like deforestation detection or climate change, there are many interesting challenges and data sets that you can use in these courses. So that would be an easy way to change the course or to seduce people to focus more on these kind of topics.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you very much, Dan and Colin, for being with us. And I think that we have set, let's say, the direction to the last discussion part. So
thank you.
Please take your seats again, if I may kindly ask you to do that. And well, Renato, I can see that you are eager to join us, which is great. Renato Calzone, thank you for being with us. Well, you have been in the expert talks already quite some time. So,
yes.
And for those who actually might not know you, you are responsible for the business development within JADS and creating.
One of the people.
One of the persons indeed. You are part of a team indeed. That's good to mention, and because it's a bigger activity. Well, we know that within contemporary universities, there are three main processes. So one is education, the second one is research, and the third one is creating impact. And you are with your team in charge of this last part.
Yes.
And I know that you have been working on, let's say, some new ideas to set the future direction for JADS. And it largely builds on these ideas that we have been developing over the expert talks in the past 1.5 hours on this social impact.
Yes, indeed.
Please tell us more about it.
Yes, could you hand
me
of course. The device?
The device.
Thank you very much. So yes, this talk is about data science for social good, and I believe that's the future of JADS. Because we were talking about this ecological crisis we are in right now before. And well, that's all about the fact that we have been depleting the natural resources on our planet over the last 200 years at an ever-increasing speed to sustain an ever-growing economy at the expense of pollution, global warming, loss of biodiversity. And my personal belief is that we can do something about it in contribution with AI and data science. Now, This is a slide which shows that from a McKinsey report that's already from 2018, that shows that over 160 use cases that can be supported by AI to be used for the social good. And we are in the same position actually, and this shows a few examples of what we are already doing. One of them is the biodiversity project, which Dan already talked about. Others is about illegal deforestation, which we are doing with WWF. Early warning scan for breast cancer, urban mining, and also our lab on the Caribbean, which is into, let's say, accelerating the energy transition. So it's our lab in the Caribbean. So we are already doing something, nice examples. So we are contributing, but I think we need to do more to bring this to a next level. So that in a few years from now, we can say, hey, we are a Data Science for Social Good Academy. And what we should do, to my opinion, is to explore other perspectives, like bringing in a systemic thinking, not only looking at point solutions, but also reviewing everything from a broader perspective. And also explore new truths, new paradigms, like not only relying on the fact that the economy must grow. Yeah, but we must maybe also look at paradigms like regenerative economics that looks more like a balance between human beings and their activities in a natural environment. And in the end, we should strive for the fact that our students, but also our researchers, must be exposed to these new perspectives and paradigms. I think that's the next level. I can give an example, and please slow me down if you want to interrupt me,
go ahead.
gentlemen.
Yeah.
But for instance, if you look at electric cars, bringing electric cars on the market is, of course, a solution to the CO2 emissions. But if you look at the more upstream costs of what it could mean for our environment, this is an example of lithium mining. Now, lithium is mined by pumping up brine and then letting it evaporate for 18 months or so, and which brings in toxic lakes and at the cost of a huge water consumption, deforestation. So those are ecological costs which are normally not accounted for, but which we should account for. Yeah. And if we look at the downstream effects, there's maybe not even, let's say, well-being involved, because if you look at these pictures, the big picture shows the way we are commuting from our homes to our work. Maybe we could do this in a completely other way. Yeah. So this is gives an example of the both looking at it from other perspectives. And meanwhile, the huge oil companies are expending a lot of money to pump up the last resources of oil, thereby endangering the limits that we have set to ourselves to prevent the Earth warming up 1.5 degrees within a few years. Probably we won't even reach that point. It will be shattered by all these investments. So this is also part of the same bigger system that we should study. New contexts that we should give our students and researchers. Another example is eating less meat. So this picture to the right shows we can prevent global deforestation if we stop eating meat. But on the other hand, probably this is very difficult to reach because it's in our culture to eat meat. Yeah, if people are successful, they feel they have to eat meat, and it's part of our culture. But maybe we can study that. Maybe we can also show these people that there are alternatives, good alternatives, and that's how we could contribute. Now, in order to bring in new ideas, we should invite thought leaders, to my opinion. These are a few to which we are in connection with, and which we can invite to give guest lectures, to bring in the new ideas, and maybe to collaborate together with to do these new studies. This is also something that our, let's say, Generation Z students, so the new people that will populate the outside world after they left our academy, are expecting from us. Yeah. So they came up with with this data science for good or doing cool stuff that matters with data motto. So we are obliged to do this, with respect to what these new people expect from us. And it's also, we are in a very unique position to do so. Yeah, we are well connected to the outside world with all kinds of businesses and governmental organizations. We do things in a so-called challenge-based way. We have a startup incubator, so all kinds of ways in which entrepreneurial data scientists can really bring about the change. We have a great team already, but we are looking for more members, and I see JADS as a whole team to do this, to bring this this change about. Yeah, that was the end of my presentation.
Yep.
Actually.
Yep. Actually, thank you very much, Renato. Actually, we have all the 3 unit leaders assembled here around the table. Well, one is physically present.
Yeah.
2 others will join us online. Willem-Jan is already there. Hello, Willem-Jan. So what would be your quest, Renato, to the 3 unit leaders in terms of the next step? And then we are going to ask them one by one what they
Think about it.
Yes, well, maybe we push it a little bit further. But let's see where we end up in 10 minutes from now. So what actually do you want them to do to make this work?
Yeah, so we are educating the next generation of entrepreneurial data scientists that are doing things in a challenge-based way, and also we have great scientists around the table. And my question is, let's make an action plan to make this happen. To let's say broader perspectives and new paradigms trickle down in the educational system.
Yeah, and what is then the main, or what is often called the unique selling point for this new value proposition you are proposing?
Well, the new selling point is that we will become a data science for social good academy.
Yeah, that's a great statement.
To distinguish ourselves.
So, Erik.
Yes, what is your question?
Are you in?
I'm in. Yeah. No, I'm in, and that might be evident from what I said before. I think it's timely, and it's about time that we do something like this. And I also think it will benefit JADS in the broader sense, in many respects, both in terms of PR and attracting students. And I also believe that it improves the research because it helps you get funding. And of course, there's still place for basic research that might be a bit outside, but I think if we use this as a guideline, that would be very, very good for JADS. For the impact.
Yeah, excellent. Maybe before we are going to ask Willem-Jan and Xenia about this, you know, when we started JADS some 5 years ago, one of the unique selling points then was the insight that data science would become the most sexist job of the 21st century. Colin already referred to that, but that also JADS in Den Bosch was uniquely positioned within this ecosystem of companies and organizations around Den Bosch, well, Eindhoven, Tilburg, you know, in the southern part of the Netherlands, where all these young people then that we educated would get an excellent job, which is still true until now. And we have seen many examples of that. So what is going to partly replace that position, that role of being, let's say, an ecosystem, the attractors in the ecosystem, and where are these young talented people going to work that we educate whenever we are going to put this plan at the top level position?
No, I don't think that there won't be a big difference. It will be only, I think things will be viewed from a broader perspective, and also the companies will have to change. Yeah. Because in order to make society, let's say, hardened up, toughened up to for the future, they must embrace also these new paradigms.
Yes.
Yeah? Otherwise, there won't be society or mankind anymore in a few hundred years from now.
So the partners will stay the same, but we will help them to make this transition.
transition.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Xenia, you are, well, ladies and gentlemen, Xenia Podornitsina, she's one of the unit leaders, but she's also responsible for, or largely responsible for the educational program. So this proposition that Renato brings to the table, does it ring a bell to do, or even does it excite you to go and embark into this new direction?
I wouldn't say that it's a new direction. I would say we already do that, to be honest. I think it's kind of helping it grow and potentially even kind of spin off a track in the master program would be part of the opportunities that I would, or the action plans that I would discuss gladly. But in general, we already have that. So we have that in data entrepreneurship and action courses regularly. So have both the kind of the business oriented, really the diehard profit oriented cases that the students are working on, but also the deforestation case, for example, that was already mentioned, was also part of those data entrepreneurship challenges in the master program, and a lot of other things. So it's, it's already there for sure. And Colin, and what I would like to have is not only just have them, separately, but to increase those spillover effects, because and particularly you see that, for example, in when students launch startups. So I know that Colin was he kind of mentioned that startup, but it was actually a very cool startup. So it was called Soda.
Yeah.
And they were really focusing, their main value proposition or offering to the market was to do data science for the social good. So this was their product. This is what they were selling. And then unfortunately, COVID hit them really, really hard. So it was really, tears breaking from my side as academic director to see that happening. But that's something that Colin might be not aware of, triggered us to have a discussion with the ecosystem team and also with other teachers in the data entrepreneurship and action series, and to create a corporate innovation track in which we connect the corporates to startups, to student startups, and then kind of in the hope that, if there's a connection, then they'll become the lead client for those student startups and they'll help them grow further. So you kind of see that those synergetic connections, sometimes unexpected or accidental, are there to happen. And I would, only love to nurture them further, I would say.
All right. So it's already there, but we have to make it more
structural
or visible and explicit. And yeah, that's
exactly.
great. Willem-Jan, what's your opinion about this?
I think when we started was around, I guess 5 years ago, indeed, and we had the United Nations just launching their sustainability goals. I still remember it dates back till that time. And I was looking already in those days at it sideways. And indeed, I guess my colleagues are perfectly right. We, in a sense, are already doing it, but what we're not doing maybe that well at this stage is branding it and also, let's say, integrating it along all the research and the valorization and the education. Now, if you look at the current political situation, also in Europe at large, and as all of you guys know, I'm aside of a Dutch guy, I'm trying to be European, and I'm looking at European research also. You see the Green Deal, for example, but also at the same time with the launch of the new Horizon Europe program, you see also the necessity to include all these elements that you guys are discussing with the social good as an intrinsic part of research. So it's not any longer that this is something nice to do, but in fact, for us as academic and researchers, if we want to tap into the research funds, we have to do it.
We have to do it.
In that sense, it's even more urgent than ever before. And again, I also fully agree with my colleagues that this indeed is not something that only would resonate with us as to the research, but also with all our students at all levels, right? From the graduate level up to the professional education.
Yeah.
So
well,
Renato,
yes. So you have 3 collaborators.
Great.
You were longing to set up a plan. I would like to stimulate you to pursue that perspective and path. And indeed, I think that given the fact that JADS is 5 years old now, and we have established a certain, let's say, set of intrinsic shared values, which I think have been becoming very explicit also during the expert talks. And I really like the statements of all the 3 unit leaders. And maybe the one from Willem-Jan is the shortest, but also the one that calls for most action, is that there is no escape. At least that's my phrasing. We have to do it, was actually what Willem Jan said, and I personally believe in that. So I can only stimulate you to not rest until we have embarked on this very, very, very challenging new direction.
Yeah, we are doing this together. So
I know.
I
know.
It's
but making
joint undertaking.
Yeah, but making homework together goes faster if one has already completed it.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
That might be your role in this. So good luck with it, Renato.
Thank you very much.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, that brings us to the end of this fourth and last edition of the Expert Talks. I feel a little bit sorrow about it because we have, as a team, built this together as one of the values of JADS, I would say, inspired by the Lustrum. Well, we will complete the Lustrum, or let's say, put the cherry on the cake on the 14th of July, ladies and gentlemen. Sorry, the 14th of June, where we will have a community event here in this very chapel, featuring all the good ways of working and the results that we have been achieving as a community. You are already invited because I know that you received the invitation. I guess it was yesterday or today or something like that, or soon. I hope to meet you all then. And for now, have a nice evening and thank you for being with us.